Morning students. Now we will discuss about web designing using HTML. The topic is web server and web browser. Now we will see the different topics in this class. Now we will discuss about what is web browser or client, what is web server, what are the purposes of web server and client, what is the process of web server and web client. We will see about processing model, then data storage, how to install web client and web server, what are the different examples. Now, first of all, we are going to see web client or browser. So, all of you know about browsers. What is the browser? Web browser. Web browser is a software which is used to browse and display pages available over internet. That's called a web browser. Web browser is always requesting a page to the server. That is called a web browser. It is a software. Then web server is also a software which provides documents when requested by web browsers. So here web server is a software that always responds to the requesting client. That's called a web server. So now we will see the process of web browser. What is the process of web server? Web browser. A web browser sends request to the server for web-based documents and services. It also sends an HTTP request and gets a HTTP response. What do you mean HTTP? Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So, what is the purpose of HTTP? This protocol is used to transfer the hypertext from one machine to another machine, one host to another host. So, that's called a hypertext transfer protocol. So, a web browser is also a sends an HTTP request and gets a HTTP response. Then process of web server. Web server sees and approves those requests made by web browsers and sends the document in response. That's called a process of web server. It also receives HTTP request and sends a HTTP response. Web browser has no processing model, but web server has three major processing models. One is process based model, another one is thread based model, then hybrid based model. There are three major processing models in a web server. Data storage. What do you mean data storage? Web browser or web client stores user data in cookies in local machine. We can store the user information in local machine. That's called a web browser. But web server provides an area to store the website. That's called a web server. Web browser is installed on user machine, but web server can be installed anywhere, but it need to be on a network or on local computer. We can install anywhere, and also we can install on local machine also. That is web server. You know the examples of web browser and web server. Have you heard about the lot of web browser, Google Chrome, Opera, Mozilla Firefox, etc. Example of a server, there are so many servers in computer field. Apache server, WebLogic server, IIS web server. There are so many examples of web server. Features of web browser. A web browser is an application used to access and view websites. A web browser is always used to access the web page and websites. For example, Ajax enables a browser to dynamically update the information on a web page without the need to reload the page. Then features of web server. The primary function of web server is to store, process and deliver web pages to the client. That is a primary function. It is always response to the requesting client. That is called a primary function of web server. It is also called a remote computers or computer programs that delivers web content. That is web server's features. That's all. Till now, we have discussed what is web browser, what is web server, what are the different processes of web browser and web client, web browser and web server, what are the processing models, which one is having a process model, which one is not having process model, what are the different processing models available in web server, and then what are the different features of web browser and web server. Till now we have discussed. Thank you.